Hey everybody, welcome to Down the Rivers podcast, our first podcast. My name is Landon.
This is Brent.
And we are here with Hop River Brewing Company, new brewery coming to Fort Wayne. We are here with Ben and Paris, the co-owners of the company, and they're going to give us a little bit of information about themselves right now. So Paris, if you want to lead the way.
Yeah, my name's Paris McFarthing, a longtime Fort Wayne resident, actually born and raised. Been around doing a lot of different things. Just my history at high school at Bishop Luers, went to college at IPFW, studied finance, and I worked at Phil's Hobby Shop all through high school and ended up actually buying the company with a business partner in 2011. So that's kind of kept me here in Fort Wayne and just kept an interest in Fort Wayne. Ended up getting a space downtown and fell in love, and now I can't leave Fort Wayne because there's just so much opportunity here. And spun that into the brewery when I met Ben, and now we are on our way to being the 6th brewery in Fort Wayne.
Something like that.
Yeah, 6 or 7, one of those numbers.
One of the bigger ones, definitely.
Yeah, we'll be, I think, so. Well, tied to the larger with Manny. I think they have a couple production systems, so they still got the capacity, but we decided to go big or go home.
Right, I agree.
I like it.
And my name is Ben Jackson. I've lived in Fort Wayne for 2 years now. I moved here. My wife grew up here. Her family's all here. I was in D.C., moved here from D.C. I was here there about the past 25, 26 years. A lawyer for a long time. Just decided I needed to do something different. So my wife and I packed everything up after, met Paris 2 and change years ago at the Dash. And we just started long distance dating for a while, and then figured we'd give it a go. And wife and I sold our house, picked up and moved here. So and I've been I guess it was April of 2016 that I moved here. And we've just been going strong ever since. This has been my full-time job since I moved here.
How's the transition from DC to Fort Wayne?
It's a little different, but it's fine. I mean, I have a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so like once you have kids, like the nice, a big city's great to have all the stuff around, but once you have kids and a full-time job, it's not like I'm doing anything except going to my house and taking care of the kids and like doing kid stuff. And they got plenty of that here. So
right, yeah, Fort Wayne's a good place for kids
Yeah,
and everything.
absolutely.
There's a lot of kid stuff and a lot of events.
Well, I always describe it as the biggest small town you'll ever live in.
Yeah, no, you
Our
get that
joke
with,
to that is we got a guy. I think
I
between
got
the
it.
two of us, like we know people that can get a lot of things done.
and I, again with family here, my sister-in-law owns Dash Inn, so there's a whole bunch of my wife's family that lives in town. A couple of them are here volunteering right now in the tap room. But it made sense, and Fort Wayne's ready for a brewery like this. There are a number of other breweries, but we say when we're pitching this to investors, and it made sense. Indiana's about 5 years behind the rest of the country in beer, and Fort Wayne's about 5 years behind the rest of Indiana. So that was a perfect time for us to sort of make a good investment in downtown as the place to do it, near the riverfront with everything going on. It just made sense.
Yeah, and he was right next to the OmniSource area, so that's going to be coming in the next, 5-6 years, being built up.
One can only hope. I say that, as a relative newcomer to the city, I say that people are like, yeah, I've heard that before. But at least the city owns it now. Like, it's no longer just sort of sitting there waiting. So I have to think they've got at least some semblance of a plan.
No, I would agree with that. I mean, being in Fort Wayne all my life, out of college, I was all but basically preparing to leave. And at the time, my wife was in Chicago, and just the opportunity to buy Phil's came up, and I was like, well, I don't know, and just kind of seized that moment. And that really made the difference for me, just being brought into the business community in Fort Wayne and just seeing that opportunity. So that was huge. That kept me here. And then, getting along in that just kind of like the desire to do more on top of that. And then it just so happened that Ben came into my life. I met my wife, then I met Ben.
I'm your work spouse.
Right. But yeah, I mean, it was a great timing. We talk about it, we joke about it all the time, just kind of the timing of everything. It's like we really couldn't have wrote this script of how it really shook out and how we met.
And through, finding the building, with the us working together, the people that we've hired, just sort of, it all seemed to be the right people, the right place at the right time. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, just really, just it's the New Englander in me, like, there's always something bad around the corner, but so far we've been really fortunate, and I'm pleased about that.
So I guess how do you guys go from the How I Met Your Mother, we should start a bar,
Right.
to actually starting a brewery? I mean, what was step one? How'd you
I think
approach
step one is like, okay, we need to write something down. We were talking about this thing.
I think we were both individually thinking about this before we met. And we were introduced by a common friend, just trying to, again, I was in DC and I thought about this is part of a larger conversation with my wife, what do you want to do? I'm tired of being a lawyer. What else can we do? I like making beer at home. What about the brewery? I like to make furniture, and I realized I couldn't sort of contribute to the household income much by making furniture, as much as it's awesome. So just what it is I can do. So I spent a lot of time, and I think Paris did too, on my own trying to figure it out, thinking like I can make this work, but realized like it'd be better with somebody else. And Paris was sort of in the same place. I think he was working with a group, and then just it's hard, I think, to find somebody else that has
to take the leap.
well, and the
drive,
time, the money,
Yeah.
just like it all has to be right.
The understanding wives, shout out to our wives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very much understanding ways. But it's a fairly unique proposition to say I'm going to drop everything or drop I'm going to drop my life savings into this, and I'm going to move and do this. You move out of the city that I've been in for 20 years and out of a career that all of that. It's a pretty big leap, and I'm generally a risk adverse person, so doing that was a little bit of holy.
Yeah. When it really worked out, like even just
shit that means.
the two of us getting together, because at the time, for Ben, he was moving back here basically unemployed, and I think his wife reminded him of that.
Yeah.
And I lucked out
She
that
was employed.
she was employed. He was not, but I lucked out that I had responsibilities at Phil's, and so I was employed. So really, we both were able to give a lot, but also like offset. So like I didn't have to be a draw on the company, but I could still put effort in and get us to where we need to be. And understanding that Ben could be here when I couldn't, and then
Right.
towards the end when we were like really in earnest building out, then we were both present and getting a lot of that done.
It has been the past couple of months. It sort of ramps up, right? To get back to your original question, I think we both, we had an idea of what we wanted. We talked a lot to see how well that meshed, and it seemed like it did. Something that was a bit large. We weren't starting a restaurant with a brewery. Those are great models, but just wasn't us. We weren't starting sort of a brew pub. We wanted a brewery, sort of in the go up to Dark Horse, go out to Three Floyds or down to Sun King, where the idea is production of beer for on-site drinking, but also to expand the brand out, having the capability of doing that. Wanted to be more than just this building.
Just the brewery,
Mm.
just
Right.
like and I see a lot of that in Fort Wayne with the breweries though. Is they're just their brewery, and you guys, like you said, Sun King and Dark Horse, you want to expand, which
Yeah.
is great because that's going to bring more jobs for you guys in the future.
And I think and I think there's a place for all of that. I mean, I think you'd find the brewing community in Fort Wayne, much like everywhere else, they're welcoming. Everybody's got sort of a niche, and trying to expand. I know the other breweries, they just had a model where they started small so they could get going, and are looking to expand, and that's fantastic. We decided to just bypass that start small part and just go straight into it, and we were fortunate that we were able to do that. But I think that's sort of why we're on the same page. We were looking at that sort of going all in early on and trying to make a go of it. And then from there, it was just we spent a good year writing the business plan, and then shopping at the banks and investors, and, doing that.
I think this has been the longest time that we haven't touched the business plan, and that's important because I think our approach from the beginning has just been really one of due diligence. I mean, here we're still very conscious of like what we need to do and what we need to do to accomplish that and where we need to end, but in that first year and a half, it was very much taking feedback and adjusting it. We had one moment in the very beginning, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, going to a bank and saying like, we want to borrow this large sum of money to build a brewery and buy a building, and they very politely said, you can buy a building or you can build a brewery. So that was kind of our first reality check. Is like, okay, let's figure out how to make this work. But I think in that story is just kind of important about our approach is. We're not one to necessarily give up. It might mean we need to kind of rethink what we're doing, but I think that's very much helped us because we planned to have a brew system, and we plan to have a boiler, but then you forget that the boiler needs water treatment. The water needs water treatment. So these things come up. So just constantly knowing like what it is we've done, where we need to flex.
Yeah, not as much. Trying to minimize this. There's always surprises. Trying to minimize them, or at least understand where they are.
Right.
And I mean, we were saying last night. We were talking last night about sort of what was was there a moment when you realized, oh crap, this is going to happen? And to some extent, yes, when you start seeing everything put together. But I think for me, I wasn't going to let it not happen. I mean, I moved here and done all that. Like, I wasn't going to not let it happen, so it just never sort of got into my mind. It's, it's not like it's some rah-rah, like, we're going to go, but it was just, there was never a point where, there were definitely hard rough spots where, like, are we going to make this work? Or our wives were like, do you have an alternative? Like, you're going to get a real job kind of thing. If this doesn't work out, I'm like, no, this is going to work. We'll get it. We just need a little bit more time. And it turned out that that was the right way to do it.
Right.
Not giving up. We knew we were going to get there.
Yeah, and just in that, and just not forcing it. Like, so we've been, and I think our personalities are such, and our here lately, kind of the comments become, like, we're not kind of on opposite ends to some extent, but we do a good job of finding the middle of where we're going together. So, and then just even through this project, there was just things that I was just naturally good at, or just kind of that was just what my niche, and there were other things that Ben was good at. But I think in working together long enough, we realized that, like, he's got it. He'll fill me in. Let's keep moving. We don't need to like stop and both spend a ton of time doing this. Like, I can do other things, and then we'll meet in the middle and like see that this thing has been propelled forward.
Oh, we got more grain. Look at that. I was just looking. I was like, that was empty before.
So a lot of the stuff that I've been seeing on like social media and stuff, and people making the jump or whatever,
right.
And a lot of the things that a lot of people say are holding them back are like their friends and family or other people saying, you're crazy. Why would you ever do this? How did you guys? Because I'm sure you guys had somebody say,
right.
This is what every college kid says is let's start a brewery, but nobody ever does it.
And I have a theory about that, and a lot of that is you have to be careful because what I've found is people tell you what they can't do, not what you can't do. So you have to be important. And I think we're both confident enough, and we're both in control enough of what we're doing, so we're not completely rash. We may have ideas, but we're not rash. So that we know like what's feasible and what's not, or through doing it we learn what needs to be tweaked. So I think going into this with the confidence, and as Ben said, just first levels, answering to your wife is like, when are you actually going to make this thing happen? But I think and what helped us through that is having a firm understanding of what we were doing, because you get people saying like, well, I see other people doing this, why aren't you doing this? Well, we have this plan and we're confident in it because of these reasons. So it's more of, I would have felt if I had didn't have an understanding and anything to rebut with, then it would have been all I have to think about is why they say I can't do it.
Right.
But my plan is such, and we can adjust it as such that, no, I have confidence in it. This is why I have confidence. This is what I see happening.
And I think also, we're neither of us are kids. I have kids. I've been out in the world for a while. This was a well enough thought out thing, like he said, but also the people around us that we talk to, I think they know us well enough to know that we're not just going to go be like, all right, I'm going to go start a brewery. How does that sound? I'll make some beer. Right. And I'm sure people are like, is that going to work? But they know us well enough to be like, well, if it's going to work, you're going to make it work. And I think our approach, again, we're both of us were home brewers, but we realized that our skill, the best use of our skill at the brewery was not brewing beer. Running the business and getting it going. So we hired a brewer, same thing. We could tend bar, but best to have somebody who's got mad skills behind the bar to handle that. So we hired Amanda. In the kitchen, we wanted to make sure we had some food. We wanted to make sure the place was family friendly, had people, gave people some options, but we're not trying to be a restaurant, but we hired Zach. He can handle that. He's got experience starting and running restaurants, running kitchens. So get the people that can do it, let them do it. Focus on everything else, because there's still plenty for us to do.
And that's probably the best advice I've heard, not just from you guys, but in general, of starting your business. Let the people who know the most about it do it,
right,
and trust them to do it.
Right, and I think it's hard, especially
it's a learning process for sure.
Well, right,
sure, it's hard to let go of some of that control.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and especially when you think about, so the industry is maturing, sort of the brewing industry, and it was definitely started out by guys who were brewing at home and are like, I'm going to do this in a bigger scale, but it was them because there wasn't anybody to hire. and you definitely get a lot of folks that are like, they make awesome beer at home, and then just sort of go through the effort of trying to figure out what it would take to do it on a larger scale. And that winnows out a lot, not because they can't handle it, but they just realize, like, looking through it, there's a lot of other work aside from brewing beer. And if unless you're going to do all of it, which means your time is so crunched, that you either have to expand your team or try to do something else. And so I think I think that's the same for any business. I don't think it's specific to breweries. You're like, I love doing this thing. I want to do this professionally. Then you just start researching it, and you're like, probably not a good idea for me to do this particular thing professionally. I can do the other stuff, and I'll get the person who can do that. But now I still get to have beer. So that
So circling back to your business plan,
Yeah.
how long did you guys work on it before you decided, we're comfortable enough to try and take that leap?
I want to say we really started in earnest like March of 16 to September of 16.
Oh, yeah.
September of 16, because our first bank meeting was like end of September.
Right.
And we were lucky enough because we kind of gave ourselves, we need to have us be shopping it by September. So between September and December, we were shopping it with banks, talking to a few investors, but shopping it with banks. Getting feedback. So like that period was us. I think, by October, maybe November, we had enough feedback, and I was just kind of like, all right, I know how to make this basically bank proof. I can write a deal that they can't say no to.
Right.
And that's what we ended up with. And by the time we reached our bank, who's Star Financial Bank, shout out to Perry Level at Star, our commercial banker. But they really, I think, one, they really believed in us. I hear that they were impressed, but I'm kind of the mind, like, doesn't everybody do a business plan like this? So,
Right.
But it helped that, like, going to that bank and just having a meeting. So we met with them like beginning of December, and in less than 3 weeks we had a commitment letter. And that goes back to us really putting in the time and the due diligence.
Yeah, and again, using our different strengths. Paris is the financial background, so figuring out how our projected financial, knowing that their guesses a lot of places, but actually trying to get as much backup as we could behind all the pricing, all the costing of stuff, and all of that. I was an antitrust lawyer, so competition was what I studied and worked on for years and years and years. So trying to figure out the local markets and how the products work, and where the trends are, and what we're likely to do. And I have friends who are economists who are going to help me crunch some numbers to put together some decent, comparisons so people could see we had not just thought it through, but we put some other, outside work into it to buttress our arguments, and so they felt comfortable knowing that it was still a guess, but it was an educated guess, not just a wild ass guess.
Yeah, the swag is always the best.
Yes, there's definitely a lot in there. There always is. It's an aspirational document, to be sure.
Well, and even in that, the lesson was, it's like we were like, oh, we're going to open by December, and here we are, like end of January. We're a little behind, but I think it's a good behind because there were just things that we never could have planned for.
Right.
That got in. We're still of the minds like we can do it, but let's at least try to do it as right as possible. Can't do it perfect, but we can do it right. And I can think of a couple drains where that happened. So it's just things, and that ends up like Ben and I working on the weekends. Like, well, we really should do this. Let's figure out how to get it done and do it.
Yeah.
So
you were lucky then, doing the competition side. I mean, I've worked on a few business plans in the past,
Right.
and that's always been the hardest part for me is, what's your competition? What's the
Right.
market look like? And I think that's where a lot of people struggle.
I think there are also resources out there. Again, when I was writing part of that when I was in DC, so I had both my sort of professional resources. At the time I was an attorney with the Federal Trade Commission, so I had a building full of economists and competition lawyers and whatnot who I could sort of bounce ideas off of. But also there were a number, the brewing industry in DC is a bit further ahead of Fort Wayne, and got to be friends with my local and with a few others, and they were willing to share sort of their business plans because they knew I wasn't going to compete with them anyway. So to see how they sort of dealt with that, and so we had really good templates to work from. So I wasn't making any of it up. I could just tailor it to this market. I could understand this market, and so I could bring my expertise to bear on a template and make it ours, as opposed to just trying to make it up whole cloth. Because it was the hardest writing thing that I'd ever had to do was the business plan, just to try to get it all out there in some coherent and defensible way. And it's funny when you talk to some banks and they're like, well, yeah, some guys come in here and they've basically written a business plan on a napkin. And I'm
Start
like,
brewery.
I don't know how that. I don't know how you do
Need
that.
money. Start brewery.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and even
Step 2.
yeah, and even then with that, it's like I think back and like I really couldn't tell you like how we started, other than we just started,
Right.
and figured out what we needed to change.
Just
Right.
put in the time. Was there a lot of failures that you learned from to help build it up?
Like business wise or in the plan?
Just in general, just failures that happen with
Absolutely.
with construction.
mistakes we
Say,
had.
Well,
say
like
there's no
hiccups.
failures, I'm gonna call you
Well,
a liar.
like-
Well, I mean,
hiccups-
there's not going to be failures
No,
because
like-
look where you're at
yeah,
now.
right.
But
Well,
like
but
hiccups
hiccups
that you
in the
learn from.
plan, not so much. I think it was just kind of like narrowing kind of what our reality is and what we're trying to do. There was kind of a couple points where we brought that into clearer focus.
Yeah.
Some of that happened with the building and like what we truly wanted to accomplish. Because I think what happened a little bit in the plan in the beginning when we first went to Banks, we knew we wanted to own a brewery, but to own a brewery, there's all these other things you need. So you just kind of tack those on yourself. And then it ends up being kind of this big plan that you're trying to bring to the door, and you lose focus of what are we really trying to accomplish.
Right.
So like
We asked ourselves that a lot. Do we want to start a brewery, or do we want to own a building, or do we want to this, or do we want to do that?
Exactly.
We want to start a brewery, so let's focus on that.
Right. So it just kind of we came up with that saying is we're starting a brewery. Let's reset on that, and then that helped us kind of focus in and like figure out what was important, because it all takes capital, it all takes money, and to some extent it's finite, you know. And we structured
And we have none of it unless we actually open.
right.
And all of that it's great, and you could have this grand plan, but unless you can fund it and get it open, then it's just a piece of paper and it doesn't matter.
Right.
So yeah.
So how was it dealing with investors versus banks?
Different set of challenges.
It was very much a bank looks for very much factual information. Like our plan is aspirational, but from a business plan side, and we had all the information. We had both aspirational information, both factual from doing trade and projections and things like that. The bank more trended towards that. They considered the aspirational because they're from Fort Wayne. And I'm a big proponent of using local banks because the advantage there is they know your community. So if you're telling them that we're going 3 blocks from the riverfront and that's going to be an intangible benefit, they're like, you're right. I understand that. So there's a big advantage there. But when we started to shift to the investor side, most of what we, maybe 3 degrees out, but a lot of friends and family, people we are
Typical for a startup.
Sure.
personally connected to. So they judged us a little bit more on the aspiration of the project. They still looked at the numbers, don't get me wrong, but their consideration weighed on like, who are we as individuals?
Right.
What are we capable of? And okay, it looks like you've thought of things, and we've got questions like, well, that answer's right here, and this is, let me expand on that. So there was definitely an advantage there, and
Plus the banks, took a mortgage on our house.
yeah, there's that.
Well, yeah.
Stuff like that. They have a certain collateral that they can get, and that was like Barrett's talking about making it bank proof. Was, if we have enough collateral on what we're doing, they're not going to say no.
Sure.
Yeah.
The investors, they don't have collateral. They have an economic interest in the company. But we take that a different level of seriously. It's not that I don't take our loans seriously because they are significant, but our investors, this is their money. So and it the people that we have as investors, whether it's friends, family, or sort of a degree out from that, the money it could be insignificant or significant to them, but it's significant to us, and we don't take it lightly. And trying to get them, there's some that are in there right now helping us put the sound system in. They come, sort of volunteer. Some are more hands off. Some are, more want to, sort of provide guidance to us when wanted. I think we've been pretty good about. There's a certain amount of selecting your investors, right? That you want to get the money from wherever you can, but you have to make sure what the cost is, both in just the time it takes to get X person on board, but also what's that person going to want, aside from what's written out of it, the way they get, like how involved they want to get. So you have to try to balance that to make sure that everybody knows going in what's on the table and what's really not on the table. And I think we've been pretty fortunate in the people that we've gotten involved with this.
Okay. And we were with that, we were very clear up front with what an investment looked like. So there wasn't much of a gray area. We were up front, and there were just, I think there were a couple of people that wanted more. It's like, we just don't have that to offer, unfortunately. So it wasn't right for them. But we definitely are conscious of creating points, ways for our investors to engage with us and engage with the brewery, but also understand that we felt it was best that the true management of the company and decision making stays to pretty much Ben and I. But we're building a very competent and capable team that can support us doing that. So it's not like we're going into being like dictators. It's
Give me money and then no talk to me.
right, but it's more like, hey, we know we can build a team that can manage it better than 30, 40 people kind of spitting ideas at us. But it doesn't mean that we're not open to listening. It's just kind of the understanding is like, hey, we can listen, but it may not fit into the context of where we're going, or maybe something we need to table for later.
Right.
And that actually, all that made up, I think there was 200 pages of documents.
And the business plan.
Yeah, and the business plan, the operating agreement, the private placement memo. So a lot of that was clear and laid out. So we put a lot of front end thought into that, and that
We gave them homework.
yeah, and that really helped out when Ben being a lawyer. So he worked with our legal team to really make sure, because there was one issue that came up from another investor that was a lawyer, and it was a valid point. So we went back to our accountant, went back to our lawyers, and we were able to address that. So like, it doesn't mean that we're saying no, we don't take any of your advice. It's just we weigh that and filter it. But just creating just kind of a good relationship on both sides. We all understand what our responsibilities are.
And I think like they're investing in us and our idea as much as investing in a brewery, and that adds to some extent the personal pressure, because we know that we sold the idea to them, so now we have to follow through. Right, we had no beer to give them before we gave them.
I would say 3/4 of them believed in us, and we had no beer. Now,
Right.
when the beer came, they believed in the beer, but
Right.
Now they're real happy now. Probably.
yeah.
So when you were planning, did you have an ideal breakdown of investors versus personal investment versus?
We
bank
set a
loans?
limit.
Okay.
So we set a limit. We knew what our bank loan was going to be. We set a limit. We knew what our minimum needed to be for outside investment, and then we knew what our maximum would be. And we reached our maximum. And a lot of that was geared around, some of that were bank limitations. If someone else got an X percentage, they would have to co-sign on loans. So we wanted to keep that risk profile down for our investors. But then also it makes sure that, we're bearing some of the risks. So just a lot of considerations that because we're managing the company, we want to make sure we have control. So it doesn't end up in a situation like, someone thinks we're not that they don't think we're doing a good job, but it's just disruption.
Yeah.
Can be, just as detrimental.
And you also don't want to be forced out of. I mean, this is your baby at this
Right.
point.
Right. No, and we made. I mean, as part of that nice thing about, both being a lawyer, but also this isn't. It's a large project, but it isn't massive, and it's a privately held company. We could dictate what the terms were going to be, and to a large extent take it or leave it. Like we were honest in what we were offering and what we weren't, and as far as voting interest and all of that. And they're protecting ourselves so it doesn't get to that point. There are various provisions as there need to be if there's some real big issue or if something happens to one of us. But we made sure to protect ourselves so that we didn't have to worry about that. We want to engage our investors. We want them to be involved. But at the end of the day, it's a financial it's a financial investment for them. We want to make it an emotional investment as well, but trying to make sure that those two things are separate.
But we also, we're clearly incentivized with the way we structured the deal. So our goals are very much aligned with their goals.
Yeah.
So, for us to really be successful, we have to make them successful in this
Yeah.
project first. So that's very much a benefit. And we've told them that, and I won't get into the details, but I think there's that. So there was just a clear line that, okay, these guys have to work for us too. Can't just... It's not just a Ben and Paris show and everything works out and it's good for Ben and Paris.
We
and
take
good
all the
for
money
everyone
and they
else.
get a little bit. No, we've set it up so that in order for us to see things, they have to see it first, and so that helps. It aligns our incentives to do the best that we can for everybody.
Sure.
Or I guess to do the best that we can for the brewery, and that benefits them as well, and make sure there's no sort of hidden thing.
Trickle down.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's talk beer now.
Let's get into it.
So I don't want you guys to leak anything. Don't tell me anything. I don't want to know any secrets because I want to be surprised on your opening and stuff. I'm definitely going to come. What kind of style of beers? IPA, stout?
IPA stout, so we have all of those in the firm
Gotta
now.
have some hops.
And Yeah, for sure.
For Hop River.
It's very interesting because we were trying to like understand who we were as a brewery, and there's a lot of ways you can go. People ask us like, do you have a signature style? Do you have a signature beer? And I think very much our approach is we'll get there. We're gonna let things shine as they shine. So rather than saying we brew, Belgians or we brew German style beers, I think we didn't want to box ourselves in before anyone is out in the public spaces really said, I really like this. But we did say what we wanted to do out of this. We wanted to have very approachable beer. So that means just having the minimum, just high quality things that are not off flavors. And then having kind of a gamut of beers that are inviting, but still be able to do kind of those wacky things.
Those wacky ones.
Yeah.
So they can come in and try it.
For sure.
And then they can know that they can get their favorite beer.
Yeah, so I mean,
well.
really giving our patrons an opportunity to help us define ourselves, but in that, like, we're making thoughtfully innovative beer, and we're making good beer. So we've got that portion, and just kind of letting the palates of Fort Wayne say, like, I really like this, or just kind of throwing new things. So it really gives everyone a chance to kind of be involved and be creative in the process, because we can brew anything. It's just a matter of we want to make sure we do it right and make it approachable as we want. So
And consistent.
And consistent.
We want people to be able to, if they have one that's a favorite or whatever, if we make it, even if we only make it a couple of times a year, they know what they're getting. Each time they come in and have that. And I think we're very much focused, especially early on this idea again. We're a brewery, not a restaurant. We're a brewery, not a brew pub. We want you to come here and have that experience on the site. Right now we're sitting in sort of our production area. On our grand opening, we're going to have people back here drinking. You can, cordon off the brewing area, but you can come back here and drink amongst the equipment. There's no place in Fort Wayne you can do that.
No, absolutely not.
See up close what's going on, not just with the windows through the brewery to the tap room, or with the whole production facility, but walk on in here and within reason, sort of engage with the brewer. He'll be here on Saturday and Sunday to talk about what he's doing, what he's done, and people have questions, all of that. Really, we're trying to be able to engage the customer when they're here, so that especially since we want to distribute to bars and restaurants, liquor stores, they can take that experience with them. They can say, not only did I think this beer tasted great, but I had a great experience at the brewery. This is the local that I want to support. And that, our whole property, we have the building, we have this great, huge outdoor space that will develop over time, but we're going to let it evolve over time. Same thing with our tap room. It's, we have certain things set, but we want it to evolve with our customers over time. Our beer, there's certain things we want to cover, there's other things we want to try, but we want our customers to tell us the things that they like, the things that they don't like. We'll see, try to make it a conversation, not just a, no soup for you. This is what you have. No Pepsi Coke. I like that a lot more in beer. That there are definitely breweries both locally and around that are like, this is the kind of beer that I make. A variety of styles, and they do it really well, and it's awesome. That's not us. We want to make really good beer, and we want to make a wide gamut of beer. There will be some crazy things, but we want to make it on style. We want to make, take whatever it is, take it a Mexican lager, take a red ale, take a stout or imperial stout. We want to kick its ass.
Yeah, those are the fun things, though.
Yeah.
Well, right.
Every September you drop this one, and everybody waits for that one to drop.
And you
want to
make it, you make it, they're style guidelines for a reason, but people know what to expect, but you can just dial that in and get it really, really good. And we're going to focus on, making that beer the best that we can possibly make it, instead of being like, here's a bunch of beer. Hope you like it.
And we can do things that push your palate, but
Absolutely.
it doesn't have to be like this crazy thing. I think it's just
You don't need a punch in the face.
right. But we want to make you think about it.
I appreciate that.
That's, and it's part of the industry, right? Early on IPAs, that was how bitter can you get? And they've dialed that back. People
like
have
how
realized what the balance. That's why I like sort of Midwest IPAs, that the good malty backbone, some good, good aroma, a bit of bitterness, but it's not, it's not just
Punch
kill
you.
you.
Yeah, and personally, I'm not an IPA fan. I love
I
a good
am.
stout. I love a good porter.
Right.
And the
As
whole
am I.
IPA
Yeah.
rush to the market, it was driving me nuts.
Well, now sours are that way, right?
I liked the earlier sours. They're starting to get a little too bitter.
Well, I think the same thing's happening. People are like, and this again happened with IPAs. People made them so bitter that they covered up bad beer underneath.
Yeah.
And so with sours, the same thing. If your underlying beer is bad, you can cover it with a bit, but eventually people will figure it out. So, I mean, that's the same thing for us, for anything that we do. The base has to be fantastic. And there's lots of things you can do after that, but if if the underlying beer, your process, your equipment, whatever, isn't set up and your brewer isn't set up to make good beer, doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter your recipe, it's still not going to be good beer. And I'd rather just sell good beer.
Are we gonna see some of Paris's home brewed one? I read your bio. It
Yeah,
said you were
actually,
brewing in your
yes.
house at IPFW.
Yeah, definitely.
We're gonna see
So-
a Paris signature.
Yeah, I'm a tinkerer, and ironically, a lot of my homebrew setup got appropriate to the brewery. It grew up, literally. And when we first started brewing, because I had all the fittings, we were actually brewing in my garage. And there's still people to this day who live in my neighborhood who drove by and kind of figured out, like, you guys are the guys. Because I lived literally in the main drag, so Kevin would be there brewing beer, and we brewed till, like, end of October.
Right.
So he'd be there most days, garage up, just brewing beer. And ironically, one of the first pale ales we did was just kind of a recipe that I had, and Kevin, tweaked it. Mm-hmm. It was really good. And so, I don't want to be the brewer, but I do think it's fun, and just for both of us to kind of maybe get with Kevin and say, hey, let's do something fun, or let's tweak a recipe this way.
The
got
pale and
to.
the imperial stout was like, I was like, I want something like this, and let's tweak it like this. And he's like, okay, I can do this and this, and it's the wonderful thing about having a professional brewer is that things that we could have figured out, he knows. He lives this stuff all the time. And after we hired Kevin, he spent the first week and change just taking water samples in the building and around so we could get a good water profile, so we knew where he was starting. Didn't do anything else. And I was really impressed by, we liked him personally, we liked the beer he'd made, his work history, all of those things, but I was just really impressed right off the bat. He's like, all right, this is the foundation of what I need to do, so everything else builds off that. So he was getting that down, and then everything he's done since then, I've been, even if it's not a beer that I'm like, I don't, like that style, but this beer I can tell it's good quality. He took the pilot system that we all that we bought and put together, and within like a half a batch, really had it dialed in, knew what it was going to do, knew it was going to come out. This massive system, the 15 barrel system, right away. We had a tech from the manufacturer come and help him, just to help dial things in, but right away the beer is great quality. We're not, there's no off flavors, no effect. His process is strong, and he knows what impact is going, and he knows what impact every little variation is going to have, or at least can suspect it, because it's still an art as much of a science.
Yeah.
And it only gets better the more you know, the more you work with your equipment. So it's just fantastic. We can talk about, okay, so when this, we can add a little bit more of this malt, and it's going to do this, but it might have this impact on the hops later on, or this yeast might not work well with this. He's got all that sort of dialed in, so we can really talk about the flavors we want, and then he can work backwards to figure out what he has to do.
So you can get that consistency, so people can come back and know that they're going to get the beer
Well, exactly,
that they enjoy.
and it's a combination of a good brewer and good equipment. We decided to go with steam and glycol, with the steam and glycol chilled system, and a 15 barrel semi-automatic system, so that we can really dial in our temperatures, control them really well, and then repeat.
Yeah, you get that really good consistency.
Right, and being able to, having that repeatability is paramount, when you're trying to make good, consistent beer. And it's ironic, the larger system you have, the better quality beer you come out with, just because you can control things a lot better, through the surrounding equipment than you can necessarily with a homebrew setup. And so it's been really exciting to watch that sort of, as we've set things up, as we've gone, just to see how well things come out.
So
again, I get beer.
Staring at all the kegs behind you. How is your experience working with the distributors been?
We don't have to work with any distributors. We are self-distributing beer.
Oh,
Yeah.
So right now, at the moment, we're not distributing anything because we're trying to make sure, one, that we have enough beer for here on site, and we want to also make sure that we understand its shelf life before we start sending it out, because the thing that will kill you more than anything else, you send out bad quality beer, or that it turns and you're not aware of it, that you have somebody who has a bad experience and you're never getting them back. So having this sort of organic growth, we work with restaurants that are close to us, either friendly or we talked closely with, to give them kegs to get a feel for not just what the reaction to the taste is, but also how they deal, how they're dealing in the keg lines there, how are they aging, so that we can make sure that as we go stepwise out and bigger, that we know that, so we can track that and we can help control that, so that we don't have an issue where 2 months in we could start getting a bunch of calls that man, this pail stinks, and nobody like there's something off, there's something happening. We have to recall a bunch of stuff. We have to deal with the backlash of people having had a bad experience. That'd be bad.
And that's critical because it ties back into the distribution comment. Like our plan was always to self-distribute. We kind of gave ourselves a 50-mile radius in Fort Wayne, and really the purpose of that is twofold. One, we want people to engage with us directly because creating that relationship is critically important. Because we could send a bunch of beer to distribution day one, but ultimately that's going to get pushed out. And with all the breweries out there, it's like, what's the difference between our IPA and someone else's when you don't know either one of them? So a lot of that for us was like, let's start from our own home and make relationships. Let's bring people to us. Let's go to them. Let's build those relationships. So when it does make sense for us to go into distribution, our beer is pulled out because they know us. They know what we stand for. They know our beer. And it's a lot easier for the distributor because now we don't slot in with 50 other breweries, but yes, we kind of stand apart because they know who we are. We've gone to their doorstep. We've tasted things from them. So that's really important. So all of this is just relationship building. And to do that is like, let's start on a good foot and let's not send out bad beer.
All right, last question before we wrap this up.
Sure.
Will we be able to get growler fills?
Day one.
Like right now? Or
No, not right now, in the near future.
No, day one.
Yeah,
Day one, all right.
We'll show you. We got some pretty cool growlers.
You guys got some...
Yeah, we got our growlers here, and ironically, and I tell this story because I'm take credit because I didn't realize they were using this everywhere, but I was at a show in Wisconsin, and I was just toying around with our logo and made our Indiana home
with a hop.
our home logo. I call it our Indiana home logo, and part of it stemmed from because our brewer's from Michigan, and I don't know if you know Michiganders. Everything's about Michigan when you're from Michigan.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I'm like, you know what?
Like,
so
they're from Michigan.
It was kind of He may not know this, but it was secretly a troll in our brewer to say we're from Fort Wayne. So we'll show you that logo. It's on our coaster. It's on our growler.
That's
but
pretty
it's
great.
just kind of cool.
Indiana strong.
On our pint glass. So we teased him in the beginning because he's a lifelong Michigander. Had to get Indiana plates. I'm like, how about those plates? So.
Yeah, I lived in Lansing for a while. The whole pointing at the hand thing.
With my girlfriend.
Oh, there
So
you go.
it was like a 3-minute drive from here, so I was like, oh, sweet.
Well, once Harrison Bridge opens back up, it's going to be, it's
Even quicker.
Yeah, we'll have bike racks. We encourage people that if you are coming to grand opening, come early.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Right.
I think it's going to be. I'm looking forward to a good day.
for sure.
All right. Well, that's our first podcast with Ben and Paris from Hop River Brewing. They're great people. Their opening day is February 3rd.
Yep.
So definitely get down here, go to their Facebook page, go to their Instagram, go to their Twitter, follow their socials, see what's going on with them. They've got big things coming to Fort Wayne, a lot of opportunities to try new beers and everything. You guys want to plug anything before?
Say ABP, always be plugging.
That's right. Yeah.
Plug anything
no,
before
definitely
we go?
like Hop River Brewing Company. And we have a great team, and we're all pumped to show you what we can do. I mean, it's been a long time coming. Some people have been with us longer than others. Shout out to MC, employee number 1.
That's right.
And then, but yeah, so we're building our team, and we're very much looking forward to giving you guys a great experience at the brewery.
Absolutely. What he said.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. It's-
Thanks, guys.
it's a great
problem.
Yep, thank you.
Hey.
Hey guys, thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you really, really loved it. You guys know we are trying to bring our best to the podcast. So whether you are walking your dog, traveling to or from work, or just cleaning the house, I hope this brought just a little bit of value to your day. Since we are new, it would be greatly appreciated if you could share this or just tell a friend about us. Thank you guys.